And welcome to the Hindus parley on whether the free movement regime along the India Myanmar border should continue or not. In February 2024, Union Home Minister Amit Shah announced that the free movement regime or FMR along the Myanmar border would be scrapped, although there has neither been any notification from the Ministry of External Affairs, which is mandatory in this regard, nor any bilateral agreement with Myanmar. Former Manipur Chief Minister N. Biren Singh's insistence is said to have led to the decision following complaints that unregulated movement of people from across the border was fueling the ethnic conflict in his state. Mizoram and Nagaland opposed this decision, not yet implemented on ground. The FMR came into existence in 1968 as people on either side of the border have familial and ethnic ties. The territorial limit of free movement then was 40 kilometer, which was reduced to 16 kilometer in 2004, and additional regulations were enforced in 2016. We have with us today Dr. Henry Zodinliana Pachuau from the Department of Social Work, Mizoram University, and Dr. Likhase Sangtam from the Department of Political Science, Nagaland University, to discuss the pros and cons of the move to scrap the FMR. So, Dr. Henry, how do the FMR impact the lives of communities living along the 1653-kilometer India-Myanmar border?
Thank you so much, Rahul. I think, the FMR, before the FMR was there has always been this whole informal transaction that has been taking place for years and years. I mean, we grew up with it. I still remember as a child, we would always have these items, from across the border that were actually being sold out here through these private businessmen, individual businessmen. So even before these rules or policies were actually implemented, so there has been always, of course, Mizoram being in the border with international border with Myanmar. So this is something quite natural actually, and as a result of this ongoing, trade that took place across the border, the communities across the border has actually indeed developed. And in fact, one of our scholars also did her PhD, degree, to find out about the Indo-Myanmar border at the Zokathar site. So we did this research in two villages. There were about, let's say, about 700 800 households in these two villages. So these two villages, I think you might have heard of Zokathar also. Zokathar is the main, yes, is the main transit point. And there is this one smaller village called Melbu. So where all these transit takes place. So obviously, the FMR did increase impetus for trade. And even though, the line drawn by this particular, regime, I don't know whether, the basically where people crossing the border at a particular, like kilometers or at a particular mile made any differences, because there's no check, there's no monitoring. So people would definitely, we find that people crossing even more than, the 16-kilometer radius, or so it did not make much point. But definitely, the trade that took place, the people out there, the communities that lived, especially, among Zokotar, Belbuk, and More, even More also, we did a little bit, one of our scholars also did the research. So we found that, they had a very high dependent on the trade economy. And so very dependent. I mean, it's the main reason why it's thriving. And we also found that before this whole BADP that took place, policy that took place back in the 1990s here in Mizoram, especially in northeast India, there was a shift from those, from agriculture to a more kind of industrial oriented, trade that took place between the borders among the communities, and it did increase their livelihood. And although, of course, they did have a lot of challenges, but yes, as far as research is concerned, the trade economy across the border did open up a lot of employment opportunities. However, in some cases, very irregular, because these trades are dependent on certain seasons, and but nevertheless, obviously, it did increase the livelihood of people living across the border.
Over to you, Dr. Sangtam.
I come from one of the district that is bordering with the Myanmar. As far as FMR is concerned, people who are living, the community who are living in the border, this is quite unknown to the people. Rather, with the Manipur problem, it has become an issue only when the government of India talked about putting a fencing between these two borders. And this, the border between Myanmar and India was drawn without taking the concern of the people of the community. And they were quite ignorant. They literally don't have the idea of nation state when this demarcation was, or when the border was drawn between the Myanmar and India. And though the FMO was there from before, yet none of the government, whether it's India or Myanmar, they literally did not impose any restriction on the movement of the people. Therefore, still the people in the region did not at all affected by the FMR.
Okay. So, Dr. Henry, how justifies is the security concern behind the center's decision to scrap FMR? Will its scrapping end migration cross-border crimes as expected?
Well, a lot of, in the past, after the border area development program that has been taking place, and with a lot of zones, or duty areas of the army, as well as the border, security force, it's there. They're there always, and it's actually basically not creating enough security, as far as like a lot of contraband goods, being smuggled inside India through Mizoram. You must have heard about the aeronut, like smuggling also. I think in one of your articles also, like there was a research done by your newspaper, and then we see a lot of, like we're talking about 70 crores of aeronut, worth of aeronut actually being smuggled. So these are the things that are actually taking place, and even in spite of these measures taking place, we find a lot of alleged, and uncontrolled trade that takes place illegally, across the border. And I don't think, scrapping this this free movement regime would create much difference. Yes.
Dr. Sangtam.
Scrapping of FMR or putting fencing between India and Myanmar is quite understandable from the security perspective. Somewhere, this has put the government of India also in a very dicey position. But nevertheless, today or tomorrow, now or later, something has to be done. Otherwise, it is going to be a big problem for the not only for the people who are living there, but it's also for the from the national security perspective. As I said earlier, the problem with us is since the people were not taken into account when they drew this line, when the government of India, whether it's India or Myanmar, when they try to put a fencing here, they are bound to encounter a fierce protest from the people. And if it's not handled properly, it might even take a different twist that may also become a big problem for the country also. And considering the kind of unstable governance, particularly in the Myanmar bordering this region, it is very, very important for the government of India to do something for this. But as I said, I think the government of India really need to take the people of the region into consideration when they have to do this. And this is one region where instability in Myanmar, with a lot of arms, ethnic groups, plus the drugs, not far from the triangle, Golden Triangle, and Chinese influence in the Myanmar is quite prevalent now. So all these things we have to take into account when we have to take a call on this. So I feel somewhere it's not going to be very easy, but I think it's very important for the government of India to do something before it's too late.
Well, with the FMR move, is the plan to fence the border? How practical is?
Yes. That is, yeah. Actually, one of our chief minister, our respected chief minister, was in his speech also did not like the idea of building fences there. But as far as, of course, as a national entity, like, of course, border areas are very sensitive, and so there is a paradox, like, I mean, a border is a place where people meet, cultures meet together, and yet borders define differences of region and territorial, boundaries and sovereignty. So, of course, from the central part, I think, they have a rationality behind it, and yes, the chief minister of Manipur also has did talk about it, because the complaints they received from More only, so we are finding a lot of illegal immigration that take place, and the movement, the problems that is taking place across the border in Myanmar, and the Chin community being affected by it. So out here also in Mizoram, we are getting a lot of migrants, displaced populations, refugees, which obviously, this is it's very difficult to exactly define it, give a definitive ground on this, because India, as far as the law and policy is concerned, is not recognizing the populations from across the border from Myanmar. So anything that's taking place here is basically out of humanitarian grounds, and however, the concerns for the community, across the border, that is within the, let's say, Indian boundary. For example, in Mizoram it would be Zaukothar, and then Melbuk, and then for Manipur it would obviously be More, and the Nagaland side, of course, and the Arunachal side, which is supposed to be one of those street ports, are still in the process of being actually, full-fledgedly run. The speculation is that these traders, I mean farmers, or business people, inhabitants of More as well as Zokatar people, fear that their livelihood has been affected as a result of the illegal immigrants coming in from the across the border, and changing the dynamics of business, and thereby affecting their business. So these are the matter of concerns, and apart from the economic aspects, of course, like, there are a lot of social problems that have come along with it. I think officially there are around 40 to 50,000 affected people from across the border that we are receiving here. And then, on purely on humanitarian grounds, the NGOs, as well as, like, the civil societies, are giving support through building camps, so on and so forth, on humanitarian grounds. So it's very difficult to say, like, to see how these things will end up, and how, obviously, the future holds, for them, as well as how their influx would create problem. Definitely, people are very mindful, locally also, out here also, even in Aizawl, among the business communities, among the localities, the grassroots, like, at the grassroots level, there is definitely a concern.
Erecting the fencing throughout a whole stretch is going to be a daunting task and is going to be a big challenge for the government to implement it. My concern is, see, it's not a terrain. Terrain, since we from the mainland, you may see it's because hilly terrain, so you'll find it difficulty. But to us, we are used to it, so I think that should not be a problem. But the main challenge will be if the government of India is not taking the people of the community into account, then I see a lot of resisting coming from the people. And very important aspect that we need to take into account is, since it's not only one community, there are so many community. After maybe 1 or 2 kilometer, or after 5 6 kilometer, you'll see another community. So handling this community will be not is going to be a is going to be very very challenging for anyone.
But how practical do you think will be this fencing? Because the terrain is so difficult, and it will involve a lot of expenditure. And we have already seen the example of Bangladesh, particularly in the northeastern part.
Yeah. Actually, I don't know what the government intends to do. Like, I believe that we have seen in the more advanced countries about fencing, where even Donald Trump also have actually decided to do that. And I don't know whether it's just a matter of copying the strategies made by the Trump organization. But definitely, it's very impractical. Number one, I mean, we're talking about a kilometer. Like if you're gonna fence the whole border, we're talking about, let's say, about 1,700 kilometers. And that's not going to be an easy task. And I think more than fencing, and trying to kind of nip it from the top. I think it's better that we have the forces are there. We have we have the customs. We have many departments that are looking after it. The police are also there from both areas. I think there has to be a proper dialogue in between the borders, across the borders, and more stringent, or I think dialogue should be permitted in order to make sure that the security concerns are not being compromised. I think that will do a greater job. I mean, just blocking away with a with a fence will not do the job. And it has never done. I mean, we have seen that. We have heard from news reports, and of course cases also, where roads, informal trades that takes place, they don't usually use that, the Bailey Bridge, that have been built from the other side of the border to Zokotar. So there are cases where these illegal traders built roads by themselves, to to cut across the border and do that. They'll do the same thing, if it's unchecked. So building a fence, which obviously will be unchecked, will not create much of a difference. It has to be checked properly, building a fence or not.
So apart from the logistics and the expenditure, I think do you think a fence, a barrier can intensify the push for a homeland because of without borders? Because people in this parts, whether it is in Mizoram or Manipur or Nagaland, they yearn for to live together, and they think that the boundary has been imposed on them.
Yes, there's a very high possibility. If the government of India is not tactful in this issue, there is a very high possibility that this may reignite and rejuvenate the people demand for common homeland. Now, particularly in Nagaland, FMR crosses the border that crosses this. It belongs to the eastern region. In Nagaland, within Nagaland, we have the frontier Naga territory. The demand for frontier Naga territories are there. And this region, these people, they are quite neglected region. Very high unemployed youths are there. And today we see a good number of educated youth from this region not being absorbed into the system. So when this kind of decisions are taken without taking the cognizance of the people, this group may go against the country or may go against the government. So we need to be very tactful when it comes to this issue, particularly in this region.
Yes, yes, definitely, definitely. We have a lot of ties, especially from across the border. The Chin communities are a very close, affinity community with the, especially the Mizo people also, and of course from along the lines. I mean, with obviously with Nagaland, or obviously with Manipur also. We do share the same ancestors, and I think, like, for example, I'll just give you one example. Quite recently, the Forest Conservation Amendment Act also, I think you must have heard about that act, where as a result of security concerns, the government has coercively, made a rule saying that, any forest area within 100 kilometers of international boundary can be just made use at their own discourse. So these are the things that are happening in the NER areas, northeastern region. I mean, if you were to measure, 100 kilometers from the international boundary, I mean, Mizoram has an international boundary in the west with Myanmar. In the east, southeast, it has with Bangladesh. And just imagine the amount of lands that can be taken away by, by the central government at their own discourse. And so these are a matter of concerns, and and some coercive, draconian even decisions that have been taken place. And I think this fencing is also one way of looking at it that way.
So, what do you think? The FMR should stay?
That's a very big question. FMR cannot continue at this. As the society progresses, now the people are becoming more and more conscious about their own identity, about their own nationality, and now with the situation down inside there in Myanmar, things are becoming very unpredictable. So if we don't fence, or if we don't if we don't come out with a certain mechanism to check the flow of people from there to here, is not going to be good for that country. But at the same time, since, as I said in the first and second question, since we have not taken the people into consideration, so putting fence also is not going to work. So we really need to educate the people, particularly from our people from Nagaland, people from the India. We need to educate the problem if we don't put a fence, and then take them into confidence. And then if we just move on gradually, that is the only way forward. I don't know how far. I haven't given a serious thought about this, but I think we really need to ponder over this, which is a big concern for for our country.
You know, I think that, like, see, the FMR is also a very good way in trying to monitor what is taking place, but at the ground reality, it's not actually helping out. Like I told you earlier, even if it's a fencing, also I'm not sure that will help out the concerns of the communities within that area. In fact, it will block a lot of opportunities for people living within those communities in the across the border. And apart from that, uh, if it is not monitored properly, Rahul, I mean, now also it's not monitored properly, as a result of which a lot of we see a lot of smugglings, taking place. Just recently also, the police were able to apprehend what do you call number four. Number four, it's a heroin worth of 22 crores. So which comes from the Zokatar area. So all these are drugs that comes from across the border, and it's not checked. Basically, it's not checked at all. So whether there is a fence, or whether it's scrapped, or whether there's the free movement regime still, like, is still followed. I think, as far as I'm concerned, there has to be a proper policy whereby these items that comes in from across the border, or from the goes from here to there, serves the economic purpose of India better. And also at the same time, while it serves the economic purpose of India better, I think it should serve the social, the social purpose of of the states themselves also, because we're having a lot of problems on drug smugglings. We're having a lot of problems on, smugglings of gold items, which there are a lot of cases. And aeronut, like I told you before, which I think your newspaper also covered. So, like, we're not only talking about that. And what is quite interesting, I'll just give you just one example in one of our findings. Also, see, the fact is that the community people also do not even understand, or are not even aware of the fact that there are certain goods, that they are trading from across the border, that are illegal, right? So we find that, the Arakan nut, which is prohibited actually, right, is actually helping about 53 households, right? And so we're talking about, a lot of things that are actually dumped. It's not only from Southeastern Asia. We believe it to have been dumped even from China itself. So these concerns, these it's really difficult to actually kind of pinpoint, like, because legally these are not actually handled yet as it should be. So we are talking about Chinese goods. They're saying Chinese goods. So obviously Chinese goods, I mean, whether they must be illegal. So there are a lot of communities across the border, especially from the Indian side, that are involved in these contraband, let's say contraband items. And interestingly so, they have, the households have also kind of indicated that they're involved in these, trades, they're involved in these business, and they've also indicated that they are also involved in certain contraband substances, and indicated that, and the contraband substances are, and there are some items that are contraband substances that are not included in the items of the contraband substances that they have actually reported. So there is a lot of, there needs to be a lot of awareness. There needs to be a proper monitoring, and I'm not sure that the free movement regime would, is a strategy that would check these things, these concerns. And I for sure, I'm so sure that the fencing also, just fencing will not solve the problem.
So, in conclusion, what could be a win-win alternative?
See, like I said, yes. For India, let's, from the national point of view, like, in the beginning, what was happening is that, we're talking about, Act India policy, and before it was Look East India, yes, and then Act East India again. So see, these are good economic strategies for India's concerns. And at the beginning, when the BADP, like started off, and then, like, they started militarization, and then later on they started coming to more social concerns, about the communities across the border area. And then after the border trade agreement that took place, and operationalized in 1995, in Manipur and in Zokotar, I think it was operationalized in 2002. Okay, and when that was done, so there was that border trade, bilateral trade agreement, barter system that was taking place, and all these things. But eventually they stopped. They stopped again, and then so they stopped because, so like I said, from the Indian point of view, it was not serving the economic purpose of India. One thing, now India should be mindful that, any all these goods, like, all these goods that comes in does serve the purpose, and some of the items that are actually bought in does not have any custom duties. So these are illegal, let's say, contraband goods that are coming in, goods, eatable items, let's say different kinds of items, even, let's say, aeronut business also, so which is considered as a contraband good. So if there was a proper policy, of whereby, you give a particular custom duties, because these things are happening anyway. These things are happening anyway. So why don't make it, legalize it, so that for Indian purpose they get good amount of, like, money. So we get good amount of money. So that is one thing. Now the second thing is that, for places across the border, all that needs to be done, Rahul, is, I think, it's not through coercion, it's not through kind of suddenly scrapping off the free movement regime, or it's not through, building fences, or it's not through, taking away the lands of the local communities. Basically, it's more about feeling a sense of ownership, feeling a sense of responsibility, feeling a sense of, like, obligation in these areas, as far as the government of India is concerned. I mean, they see the border, they have the border security forces, but under their very eyes, so many things are taking place which is against the law. There are the armies under their very eyes, so many things are taking place, under their very checks. There are the police, so many things are still taking place across. So there has to be a kind of, let's say, a kind of an enforcement agency, which necessarily need not be something external, but which can be strengthened from within, and make sure that, the security concerns of India are protected properly, not through, these coercive, scrapping off, or like building fences, but to make sure that, I think we have enough logistics to, and manpower, as well as the mind, knowledge, skills, to take care of these concerns, no, rather than doing away with the free movement regime, or even building fences, or even, like I said, taking away 100 kilometers of land out of security concerns.
Thank you, Dr. Pachuau and Dr. Sangtam, for your time. Have a nice day.